Coming to paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Isis, All That Glitters. The goddess next door takes on a bikini-clad bank robber in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, All That Glitters in paperback and Kindle Unlimited this March. I had been anticipating Netflix's Punisher Season 2 ever since I saw the last episode of the first season. And I had been anticipating it because I wanted to see Frank Castle taking on his arch-enemy Jigsaw in an action-packed war in the streets as Jigsaw set up his mob and Frank had to declare war on his former army buddy in order to bring stability and safety back to the streets. Unfortunately, all of those promising storylines and character development that were set up in the first season of The Punisher were pushed to the back burner so Netflix and Disney's producers could push a gynocentric narrative on the show about how strong the women were, and they wanted to use Frank's show as a complete soapbox to take pot shots at Donald Trump as they showed us how strong the women were. I didn't think it was possible to emasculate a character as masculine as the Punisher, but here we are, because the simp levels on this show are way over 9,000. Now, Punisher Season 2 runs completely off the rails within the first 5 minutes of the first episode. Now, after your Frank had been cleared by Agent Madani, he is now under a new alias as Pete Castiglione, and he's riding around on a road trip. Now, he decides to stop off in one of these roadhouse bars for a beer, and he runs into a very attractive woman at this roadhouse bar, and that's where we start to see Frank starting to act out of character, because we start to see Frank simping. And Frank levels reach the 5,000 level within the first 5 minutes of the show, because that's when he decides to play the white knight as another guy tries to hit on the attractive bar owner. Now, Frank manages to use a little bit of macking skills and hook up with this bar owner, and then after they hook up, he decides to drive her home. He finds out she's a single mom and she's got a son, and that's when he decides to take everyone out for pancakes, and that's when the show's levels go over 9,000 on the simp level, and that's when Shawn has to do this. Somebody please get Frank Castle a copy of my book, Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance, and get him a link to my blog, Why Real Men Avoid Single Mothers. When I saw your Frank Castle, one of the most masculine characters in the Marvel Universe, going out here simping, it just was one of those head-shaking moments, because Punisher Season 1 was filled with strong masculine characters, and it promoted healthy masculinity. And your Frank wasn't out here simping at all. In fact, he showed such great character that when he was with Microchip's wife, he didn't want to violate their relationship, even though she was attracted to him. He still respected their marriage. And he showed the character of a man in that first season. But in this season, they have Frank acting like a complete simp, and it just shows how gynocentric the themes and overtones of this season are. And the gynocentrism in this show, it just runs so deep that it literally, again, derails any of the momentum the show has. And after your Frank's simp levels go over 9,000, that's when Amy comes in and starts the storyline for the second season. And the storyline that Frank has for the second season, I'm not happy with this storyline, because they decide to use these Christian cult members to make this storyline where they make pot shots at Donald Trump, and that had no place in The Punisher. Instead of giving us that build up to the story about Frank Castle having to come back to take on Billy Russo and his mob, no, we get this storyline featuring this John Pilgrim and this billionaire that is completely a jigsaw of uneven pieces and never comes together for a complete story. But to start that storyline, your Amy comes in to the bar and she's being chased by these Christian cult members. And then your Frank, he doesn't go into action as the Punisher. No, your Frank Castle goes into action putting on that Ben Cooper cape, those Mickey Mouse galoshes, and he plays Captain Save-'em as he goes into the women's bathroom to save Amy from the Christian cult members. And that's when the simp levels on this show go way over 9,000, and he kills the cult members, saves Amy, then goes on the main floor where we see, yes, Frank goes into action, but then we get more shots of strong women as the bar owner decides to struggle with his shotgun in the heat of battle and tries to join in. Unfortunately, all she does is wind up getting herself shot. Now, your Frank, after his girlfriend gets shot, he winds up on the run, based on nothing he did of himself, but all based on these producers' desperate need to inject gynocentrism, identity politics, and feminism into the Punisher's story. And them trying to interject this gynocentrism, this feminism, and identity politics, again, it just derails Frank's story, and it makes for a very uneven and disjointed storyline because Frank winds up on the lam in Michigan, and that really disjoints the storyline because this John Pilgrim storyline, it just never really comes together to become anything cohesive. Now, after another run-in with John Pilgrim and his cult members, Frank gets arrested in a small town. He's taken to jail. He calls Agent Madani to bail him out, and after she hangs up on him just to show how strong she is, Frank winds up in jail, and we get a sequence that literally rips off the movie Assault on Precinct 13. And the poor black guy, he winds up getting shot, and then there's a whole bunch of cult members out there trying to kill Frank and Amy, and we get Frank having to go into action, and then all of a sudden we get the Madani Ex Machina, which tries to link both of these horrible storylines together. And it's just done in such a disjointed way that it just doesn't come together in a solid and cohesive way. Now, as the show returns to New York, we get Billy's story starting to build up. And sadly, Billy's story never really takes off the ground due to all the gynocentrism, feminism, and identity politics in Punisher Season 2. Instead of us getting that complex story about an incredibly handsome man coping with the loss of his looks and his career and starting down the dark road to becoming a crime boss, we get this shallow, predictable story about the crippled female psychiatrist who falls in love with her sociopath patient, and Agent Madani trying to reclaim a part of herself that she lost when Billy shot her in the head in the first season. There's one of the things that just annoyed me was seeing how they took this Jigsaw character who was being built up into a credible threat and turned him into a complete cuck and a complete simp all throughout the season. But they start out by cucking and emasculating Billy Russo and not allowing him to have the story that allows him to be a credible threat. Now, your Billy Russo, he does leave the medical facility, but they never really give him the strong storyline he was supposed to have, because as I see it, a man with his type of military training and survival skills, he's supposed to be a top-notch soldier. He was a guy who could have gone out here and survived on his own, and he could have used his survival skills to build himself up as this crime boss, but instead your Netflix and your Disney didn't want us to see this man using his brilliant military training and his tactical training to go out here and build himself a criminal empire. No, we get this codependent relationship where this guy is living with this psychiatrist, and we get this, in contrast, Frank Castle living with Agent Madani for a couple of days or so, and this completely emasculates both of these characters. Now, when it comes down to military trained men, again, these are men who have natural survival skills. Guys like Frank Castle can live in the wilderness for months when they're going on missions, and they know how to survive using the landscape. So I would want to see these guys like using their natural survival skills to go out here and do things. Frank on using his natural survival and hunting and tracking skills like he uses for criminals on the road to going out here and solving the case with Jigsaw. And I wanted to see Jigsaw using his survival skills in a way to build up his criminal empire. That's what we want. That's what I wanted to see from these characters. But in an effort to give us more strong women, we see Madani keeping Frank at her apartment for a couple of episodes, completely emasculating him. And we see the psychiatrist having this man in her home, and they're both living almost like these thugs and gangbangers who live with the women, and they're stuck in a codependent situation where these men cannot go out here and be the men that they're supposed to be, because when it comes down to men, they usually use their survival skills, and that's part of them being a man. But because Disney decided to interject all this gynocentrism, this feminism, and this identity politics, that's why the show falls completely apart. And every sequence that they have in the show falls apart, because just as the action is ratcheting up in one scene in The Punisher's second season, we get the strong women who come in and suck all the energy out of the show. Now, I looked at some of the scenes in there, and it was just annoying. Every time Frank would come in and try to do something, they would try to bring in one of these scenes to show how strong your Madani is or how strong your Amy is. And one of the most ridiculous scenes in The Punisher Season 2, where we see the penis envy, is the scene where Amy kicks her friend in the crotch. And it clearly shows, again, that these producers have this feminist idea that men and women are the same, because they think that because men and women are the same, a woman kicking another woman in the crotch will have the same effect as a man being kicked in the crotch. What they don't understand is men and women are biologically different, and men and women are completely different, and a woman would not kick another woman in the crotch. So when I looked at that one scene, it thoroughly annoyed me, because it showed that this was more about identity politics than giving us a story. And I looked at this whole story, and what happens with season 2 is it becomes a jigsaw puzzle of disjointed storylines, uneven character development, and it never really becomes a complete image of the screen of why we need Frank Castle and why the Punisher is important. Now, that's the story that they want to try to tell in Punisher Season 2. Unfortunately, due to all of the gynocentrism, feminism, and identity politics, Frank's story never really comes together in a cohesive fashion, because they want to keep making these scenes with these strong women, and those strong women don't really have an organic place in Frank Castle's story. And the story that they try to force into the show with this billionaire's gay son who's kissing this Russian man, which is a middle finger up at Donald Trump, and Amy being chased by John Pilgrim, all of that really does not really fit organically into the second season of Punisher. And it throws the show completely off, because what we really wanted to see again was that feud between your Frank Castle and your Billy Russo, and sadly that storyline was pushed to the back burner, all because the producers wanted to use the show as this soapbox to take their shots at Donald Trump, take their shots at white Christians, and push their identity politics, where they make time to insult people, all while showing us how strong these women are, but not showing us why the Punisher is important and why the Punisher's mission is important, because that should have been the theme of the second season, and I could see glimpses of that theme in the second season, where they were showing why Frank was the only guy who could take down these cult members, why Frank was the only one who could deal with these criminals, because these criminals were above the law, they were beyond the law, and the people they were using to hurt people went beyond the standard police operating procedures and the operating procedures of law enforcement. And in the final scenes of the last episode, they showed why the Punisher was important in a small sequence where Madani is calling the Punisher, and she's saying to Frank that she needs him for a government mission, but he was saying he was already working because the work he was doing on the streets was far more important. Now, that should have been the core theme for the entire second season, because we saw glimpses of it. We saw it at the police station in that Assault from Precinct 13 ripoff scene, where the police just couldn't handle those cult members and Frank handled them almost easily. We saw it in numerous scenes, and that, again, should have been the theme for the show, but that whole storyline was completely buried, all because these SJW identity politics and the need to show us these so-called strong women when we should have seen women having the strength of character to come to understand why they needed to support Frank Castle in his mission in declaring war on crime, because it's his war on crime that makes everything safer for everyone else. But we don't get that story because we have these SJWs either working at Netflix, Disney, or Marvel, and they would rather push this gynocentric narrative in The Punisher, and that punishes the viewer by not giving us a quality second season the same way we got with Luke Cage. Now, with Luke Cage, we got a spectacular second season, a second season that was incredibly well crafted and showed that a Marvel Netflix series could be on the same level as The Dark Knight in terms of storytelling. And with Daredevil Season 3, we managed to get a very solid third season that was very true to the character, very true to the source material, and with the exception of the last few episodes, very little gynocentrism, very little identity politics, and very little simping, and that led to a rock-solid third season, which had many people wanting more. Now, with this Punisher second season, I was deeply disappointed because, again, the strong women sucked out all the energy of many of the scenes, much of the build-up. I mean, the Madani taking on Jigsaw took all of the energy out of it because the beef was never between Madani and your Jigsaw. It was between Jigsaw and Frank, and that was a storyline we needed to see built up. But what we got in this show was an incredibly anticlimactic ending of the Jigsaw storyline, where your Madani shoots him. He then winds up going to this doctor who takes his money, and then Frank just comes in at the last minute and just kills him. And that was anticlimactic. It had no... all this build-up, you build up this character on that carousel, you make this guy, you destroy him, and then he doesn't even come back to be the threat he should have been. I mean, here again, you have a military-trained man with incredible tactical survival skills, and what we wanted to see was this man showing how he could survive with nothing, turn into somebody super big and a very dangerous threat that even the police could not handle because of his tactical training and his ability to get these soldiers behind him because he's a charismatic man, he's charming. And this is a man, again, only the Punisher could deal with, but all of that great storytelling, that was completely lost. All because these people in Hollywood are so caught up in Donald Trump, they're so caught up in, identity politics, they're caught up in social justice, and instead of understanding that the Punisher's brand of justice isn't social justice, it is the harshest form of justice because it deals with people who are above the law and beyond the law, and we don't get that because of all the social justice narratives in this show. Now, what I liked about the show was your action sequences, those were solid, and I like John Barenthal's portrayal of the Punisher. in spite of all of the bad writing, he manages to elevate these scripts to another level. He puts a level of humanity on the Punisher. He shows us that there is a man who cares about people. He shows us a loving and compassionate man in scenes with Amy and scenes with the bar owner and scenes with Madonna. He shows that he cares about people and that he's not just some ruthless killing machine, but he's doing this because he wants to protect those from these people who are above the law. So I saw some multidimensionality with his character, but sadly, the multidimensionality he presents and the way he elevates the script, all of that sadly can't do much about the jumbled, disorganized storytelling because the producers were more in their feelings about Donald Trump than going out here and giving us a quality story, because that's what I wanted to see in Punisher Season 2. I wanted to see quality storytelling that was true to the source material, quality storytelling that was true to the character, and all of that was lost because these producers wanted to take the material of the Punisher and compromise it to meet their narrative and their need to push these strong women, and we didn't need that. What we needed was a quality story, because we could have had one of the best adaptations of the Punisher with Season 2, where we see this war on crime and why Frank Castle's war on crime is important, but we didn't get to see that because everybody was so caught up in Donald Trump and their feelings about Donald Trump that they couldn't give us the story, and that's really sad because there was so much promise built up into Season 1, and we never got the chance to see that promise actualize its potential for Season 2. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, The Temptation of John Haynes, the John Haynes series, the Spinsterella trilogy, and my men's issues books like Stop Simpin', Manginas, The Misadventures of Captain Savaho, and The Man Crisis, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.